Hi there. Welcome, everybody, to Father Shawn's Paranormal Ministry. Unfortunately, he's ill this week. I'm his normal co host, Annette Munich. I own Stellium Books, and we have a great show for you today. I would like for everyone to remember Father Shawn and Sharon in your prayers, and also all of the people that send prayer requests into us, because I don't have access to that prayer jar. But we'll be keeping everybody in our thoughts and prayers, and hope that Shawn and Sharon have a speedy and complete recovery. You are listening to UPRN Talk Radio, 107.7 FM in New Orleans. And we're so excited about this show today, and so glad for all of our listeners. We appreciate you, and we also greatly appreciate Michelle DeRoche for producing our show and being behind the scenes, making sure everything goes fine today. Just lovely of her to do that, and we thank you. I'm going to go pretty quickly to, well, a few things that Shawn mentions. You can find him at ghostbegone.biz. And also, he has two books, and they are God, Ghosts, and the Paranormal Ministry, and God, Ghosts, and the Paranormal Ministry 2. And I actually have a copy of that right here. And this can be found on Amazon. It's in paperback, Kindle, and also audiobook. And if you want a signed copy, you can get that through his website. And he also sends a little kit to everybody that orders. It's a very nice touch. Let me see. I got little sticky Post-it notes all over the place here, so please bear with me. All right. I think I covered what Shawn would say. Very excited about our guest today. We have the amazing Morgan Knudsen, and many of you have seen her on Paranormal 911 and Haunted Hospitals. She's been around the paranormal community for 20 years, and she does a paranormal podcast with Michael Brown called Supernatural Circumstances. And we were fortunate enough to get Mike to come on the show with us today. So he's joining us, and we're really excited about that. So please give a big warm welcome to Morgan Knudsen and Mike Brown.
Hey, it's good to be here.
We're here.
And suddenly you're here.
Yeah, poof.
And I want to thank you so much for coming at the last minute. I just thought it would be a lot of fun, and you have a new book, and you guys do a really nice podcast, and I love the promo that you have for that with the rain and everything. It was really well done, beautiful. Awesome. So I thought maybe you might like to come on the show and talk about that a little bit, but we'll start with Morgan. I watch Paranormal 911 and Haunted Hospitals. Those stories are very well done. The reenactments are beautifully done. They're very scary, I think. And I've been in the paranormal for a while myself, and I think they're scary. So just beautifully done. And they're on Discovery Channel, but I thought, did they start on Travel Channel and move? Or
they did.
They moved Ghost Adventures over, and
yeah, everything's kind of gone to Discovery Plus, but Travel Channel has been a big resource for most of these shows for a really long time.
Really nice. I guess everybody probably asks you how you got started and what your first experience was. So I guess I'll go down that road as well. I hope you don't mind telling it again, but people always like to hear the first experience that people have.
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. I mean, it started when I was really young. Like most people, I lived in a haunted house in BC, in British Columbia, and lived in a series of them for a while with my parents, and I was no more than about nine years old. and had a really crazy experience where I got rushed by something, this sort of opaque shape that rushed at me, and I didn't know what it was. And the house had been a plethora of activity in multiple ways. We'd seen apparitions and stuff was going missing, like all sorts of weird things going on. But uh, yeah, but one morning, I had this one incident which fascinated me. I mean, it scared me to death, but I was fascinated and I couldn't put it down. I mean, I was trying to figure out as just basically as many avenues as I could possibly uncover to figure out what was going on. And I was really fortunate to grow up in the era where, the researchers on TV were authentic. They were people like Lloyd Auerbach and Terry Gaynor and shows like Sightings. And it was a really great time to grow up. And I found out much later, 6 years into my career, that my great great grandfather was a paranormal researcher as well in the early 1900s, and he was a very famous figure in Canada, A.D. Watson. And I had no idea about that until much later, but it definitely feels like a calling.
Nice. It's kind of interesting because you said you lived in a bunch of different haunted homes. And I noticed with myself and some other people that once we have a paranormal experience, it seems like wherever we go, we might activate whatever might be in the area just because they think that we might be able to see them or hear them. Because I think in the case of myself, I don't think I had an attachment. It was different things. But
Yeah, no, I find that like if you're in the right vibration, if you're just in tune with this stuff, then we can connect in. And that's one thing Mike and I we talk about a lot on the podcast, is that the more we get to be sort of tuned in, tapped in, turned on, so to speak, with this phenomenon, with ourselves and with the universe, then it opens you up to having these experiences. And so we're always really encouraging that, is to bring people into meditation and all of these types of things that can connect you in with this stuff, because it can really really be life-changing.
right. And what about you, Mike? How did you get started? Were you a child for your first experience?
Well, my grandmother used to rent a house right next door to the funeral home in my hometown. So I grew up around that industry, which is kind of interesting. There were feelings I had as a kid, but the first real experience that I can recall was something strange and odd that I haven't been able to put a real finger on. My buddy and I used to have sleepovers. He lived 2 houses down, and we would sleep over at each other's place. And one night I was sleeping at his place, and he was dead asleep, and I was not. I woke up to see this thing. It was like a shoulders and a head standing beside the bed, and it had what I called at the time Spider-Man eyes, because that was my frame of reference. I loved Spider-Man, and I think I was like 8 or 9 years old. And so I saw this thing with Spider-Man eyes standing beside the bed in the dark. And I don't recall feeling afraid. I don't recall feeling much of anything, but I couldn't move. And, I just saw it for a few brief seconds. And then I woke up the next morning, and I didn't really think of it much after that, strangely. Like, it was like, okay, I had this experience. I'm 8 or 9. You think I would be talking about it to everybody, but I didn't. And it wasn't until years later, when I saw the cover of Whitley Strieber's book, Communion, that I was like, oh, that looks very much like the thing that I saw standing beside the bed. So I don't know. I don't know what it was, but it looked very much like the gray that Whitley Strieber had on the cover of that book. Whether or not I was dreaming, I have no idea. I mean, I hadn't seen the movie Close Encounters by that time, so I wouldn't have seen that. I was only, like I say, 8 or 9 years old, but yeah, where would I cook that up? So yeah, that was my first experience. I've had other sort of weird things over the years, but we can get into that later.
That's super interesting, and I loved Whitley, and I remember reading Communion. I've read some of his other books as well, but really a big fan of that. And then they made it into a movie, and I think it was really well done in the way that it kind of portrays how that happens to people in a pretty honest way. I do like to bring up sometimes that way back in the day, people in the paranormal community kind of had to choose if they wanted to talk about ghosts or if they wanted to talk about UFO alien stuff or Bigfoot stuff. But if you picked more than one category, you were for sure crazy. So you had to pick your one thing and stick with it. But I found that a lot of people, if you're sensitive, you're sensitive. And a lot of people have also seen UFOs. I've seen 2 here. Since I've been here, I've been by Tulsa, Oklahoma for about a year. I saw one in Oklahoma before. So if you don't like UFOs, don't come to Oklahoma. And I mean, it's like crazy because the one time in particular, I called the whole family out to look at this. I'm sitting there, I'm watching it, it's not moving. It just blinks red, then white, then red, then white at the bottom, not moving. I get thirsty, go in, get some coffee, come back out, it's still there. It stayed there till I went to bed. I watched it for hours. It was definitely not moving. Now, you can say, I'm not saying that's a spaceship. I don't know what it was. The technical definition, unidentified flying object, means I don't know what that was up in the sky that night, but it hung there for hours. And I've seen it since, but it didn't stay there that long. But really interesting. And you did kind of have to choose what you were going to talk about, or else everyone would just disqualify you. We'll be like, oh, here we go. What else do you see?
Yeah, I think though now, and I mean, we've had this conversation, Mike, so many times, is that this phenomenon really is all connected to one another. It really does come back to consciousness, and that's what we've been finding. I mean, we've talked to so many people, through the show, so many incredible minds, and it all just keeps coming back to the same thing. And no matter which subject you pick up, like you were saying, Bigfoot, hauntings, UFOs. I mean, it really doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, it really does come back to our connectivity. It's really interesting, and it's definitely changed my perspective and moved my needle over the years, because I used to be like that, where I was very much like, okay, I just sort of stay in my category over here, and now I realize like I can't. You can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of recent that they kind of linked everything together and started seeing everything as maybe I'll say other dimensional. Would that be a good way to put it? Just other dimensional beings?
Yeah. We're definitely, it's definitely seems like we're tapping into different frequencies, right? Like there's something bigger than us that we're tapping into somewhere. And I mean, anybody can just guess what it is. I mean, I don't think anybody's got the answers. If anybody says they have the answers, I think they're lying. Right. And I think this is part of the journey for us, as spiritual beings, is to try to figure pieces of this out and uncover this, because it's all about tuning in and what we're ready for, and it's cool.
What do you think about people? I've started seeing this in the last few years that want to classify everything UFO alien as demons.
That word drives both of us insane. Mike, did you want to take this one? Because
no,
I mean,
no.
if you were to think that that's malevolent, I think they could have done something bad to us a long time ago. They've been around. I mean, all the way back to the pyramids, we see hieroglyphics that look like demons, not demons, sorry, UFOs, spaceships, whatever you want to call it. They've been around for a long time. But now there's people saying that they think they're demonic, but they really could have done something. I know they abduct people, but I mean, they could have done something to us a long time ago if they were generally of bad intent.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah, no.
exactly the way I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this idea of everything being a demon. I mean, I don't believe in demons to begin with. I definitely know there are entities out there that don't have the greatest intention, but I'm not neither am I religious, so I think that word has been really bastardized over the years, especially with a lot of the paranormal TV shows. Everything's become, this is evil and this is demonic and this is it's really become a buzzword. And I just it drives me nuts. It's a word that I do my best to veer away from. And I mean, well, Mike, I mean, we don't talk like that on the show either.
No, we definitely don't. But at the same time, I think it's what people's frame of reference is. It's like it depends on what your beliefs are and where you are on the spectrum of spirituality, really, what you see something as. So try not to poo-poo the word, because maybe somebody that's just their belief. And they have every right to that belief. But I see it as from a different lens, from a different point of view. So yeah. It's fascinating stuff that humans, we're all so different, and we all have our own way of looking at things and our own perspectives. I wish we could all get together and really have a conversation and listen to one another. That's why shows like this are great, because we can have this kind of conversation and try to understand where everybody is coming from. I love it. I love doing this stuff.
Well, it's also kind of one-dimensional to think, I think, my opinion, for what it's worth, that everything that is what we would term aliens is the same, from the same place. They want the same things. They're just very different versions of the same thing, maybe, instead of that there could be all kinds of things going on out there, and we just want to look at it in very simplistic terms. Just, like when you see a flower, how many different kinds of flowers there are, but you can call them all flowers.
Yeah, right.
But we're talking more about aliens and UFOs than ghosts and everything else, so that's kind of funny. But it is really curious. And there's an awful lot of sightings, and there's people that are waiting for full government disclosure, and I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I think we're to the point where everybody that doesn't believe in it, they just don't want to believe in it, and they just shrug their shoulders and live their life. This has been around now for a very long time, a very, very long time, and reports on top of reports. And now we live in a day and age where everybody has a camera in their pocket, so they're able to take videos and post them all over the place. So, I mean,
yeah, I'm in a bunch of Reddit groups that sort of follow all of these different things, and people will put, like the other night, somebody posted this thing about their outdoor camera, their sister's outdoor camera recorded this thing, and the guy's like, it's a ghost. But at the same time, pretty much everybody in the thread, myself included, said that looks like a spider spinning a web in front of the camera. So but I guess you see what you want to see sometimes. So yeah, there are cameras out there, but I don't see a lot of cameras taking photos of something that I'm gonna be like, whoa, wait a minute, there always seems to be an explanation right now, which is sort of disappointing because I want to see a photo of Bigfoot. I want to see, GoPro stabilized Sasquatch walking along, in high definition so we can really have a good look at Sasquatch. But instead, we see a little tiny figure really far away, and it turns out it was a park warden, standing on the mountain over there. But everybody says, well, it's Bigfoot because you can't really see it and it shouldn't be up there and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
But,
I find like, just to touch on that, is that the sometimes I think the cryptid side of it is complicated by the fact that some of these creatures just don't want to be around people. So I think there's that distance factor, and our like phone cameras and stuff are absolutely terrible at distance. Like my phone camera sucks at distance. Like as soon as it gets past a certain, it's grainy as hell. But I also think that the average person isn't really tuned to getting pictures. Like, I mean, I've been on investigation after investigation, and it's even happened to me where I've seen something and my brain's going, I don't know what that is, and it's trying to figure out what it is, and by the time it figures out that it's weird, it's gone. and I've had that a couple of times happen to me, and I mean, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I've still had this happen. So like I think when we get into this type of photography, it gets messy and it gets complicated, and we just have to lean on footage like in the Sasquatch case, like Patterson Gimlin and stuff like that, and and just hope you're in the right place at the right time. But I mean, the average person isn't prepared to film something weird, and that's just one thing I've learned over a lot of years doing this. We're just not ready.
And I think that's very true. And like me on my phone is the same. I could see it clearly with my eyes, but if it's at a distance, I'm going to have a hard time. And then when you try to enlarge it to look closer, it starts to distort and not be clear anymore. But I think that they're getting more and more about Bigfoot. I've seen a lot of stuff of people putting cameras on trees and catching sounds, especially sounds, and some pictures, and a lot of it's at night, and so that makes it hard too. But I used to kind of not really think about it one way or the other, but more so lately, I think that there is. I wish they'd find a dead one.
Yeah,
that would
right?
help a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's even going to happen. Like, I mean, here we're talking about this idea that some of these things are interdimensional, right? Or
Right.
spiritual of some sort. And, I wonder whether or not that might be one of the reasons why we haven't yet. But,
Right.
That being said, there's a lot of wild animals that finding them dead, like even if this is something that is more like a wild animal, there are certain wild animals that we still have yet to find dead in the wild naturally. So if you've got something that is intelligent that maybe buries the dead or does something like that, I mean, you're in a world of hurt when you think about the mass of trees and acre upon acre of woods, even just in BC or in Canada alone. There's places where, I mean, you could step off the road 20 feet and you might be standing where nobody stood in 10 years.
Right.
So I think the idea of finding one or something like that, it's going to take a far larger effort than what's been made, by biologists and stuff like that now.
I was kind of curious that people come across what look to be Bigfoot camps, and the trees are pulled up out of the ground and put in upside down, and you can see that there looks like big rocks where they sit and eat, and then bones where maybe they've eaten some, kind of animals, and a certain kind of smell is there, and that's really interesting. I saw a show with a guy, going through the woods, and he just takes like a piece of wood and starts whacking at the trees and making that noise, and then he hears something come back. Something does it back. And that's happened to him, more than just a few times. So it's really interesting. But that and occasionally looks like hair that gets caught on a fence or in tree branches, and they analyze the DNA and can't really seem to find what kind of species that is. So, and again, it's possible that we're dealing with an interdimensional creature that can just go in and out, kind of like ghosts come in and out.
So some of the Bigfoot folks get really upset with that when you mention the possibility that it's some sort of consciousness thought form or something from another dimension or quantum or whatever. They get so wound up about it because some folks want it to be something physical so much that to say that it may be something different and it may not be physical just drives some folks right around the bend. And to me, that's really fascinating as somebody who's, I don't know what it was that we were looking on the Patterson Gimlin film. I don't know what it was. I know what people have said it was. I know what people are alluding to it having been over the years. There's been all kinds of different theories. People say there was deathbed confessions to hoaxing and all that kind of stuff. The people aren't here anymore to verify those things, funnily enough. But yeah, it's more interesting to watch the people around the ideas than it is to be searching for these things, because human beings have these really strange fixed ideas that sometimes if they're threatened in any way, we'll really go crazy. Like Morgan and I, we talk about at the end of our show, every show that we have, we talk about how everything, all is consciousness, in that everything emanates from consciousness. And I've had some discussions with people who are dead set against that kind of thing and really stuck in the material world. I think, the best description I've ever heard about what we're doing here and what our experience is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and so that's kind of how I approach life. And I'm just like, everything is really super interesting to me. All these topics, I could dive down the rabbit hole into magic, into fairies, into
Right.
Bigfoot, like all of those different things. They all sort of fit into the same category for me. And
You know what, too? I mean, I feel like, because I'm interested in all of the supernatural, quantum realm, anything like that, and I don't have to have an opinion on it. I can learn about it and be like, that's so interesting. I could read about it some more. Maybe I'll find, that I'm really interested in it. Maybe I'll just feel like, I don't know. I don't have an opinion about that. You don't have to, I think we're, to a place in time where everybody feels like they have to get on a soapbox and scream out an opinion about everything, but you really don't. You can say, I don't really know that much about it. I'm just kind of learning and I don't have an opinion about it. But, in the ghost realm, is something that I always thought was interesting, was the use of the word haunted. And I think a lot of things are called haunted. But to me, haunted means something's actually attached to that place. Because in my world, the whole world's haunted. And, if somebody says, hey, there's a Civil War battlefield, I think it's haunted. Hey, there's no abandoned hospital, I think it's haunted. My reaction would be like, of course it's haunted, because we're living, in a spiritual world where there's all kinds of things around us all the time. And just like with Bigfoot, because someone saw something in a house once, Doesn't mean it's there all the time. Doesn't mean it'll ever come back. Doesn't mean it's there now. Things pass around and move around, and all kinds of really interesting stories if you dig into history. I know that I had the lady that wrote me at my website years ago, and she and a bunch of her neighbors were experiencing a lot of paranormal activity, but it turned out that when we looked into the history, all of that land was owned by this one big house, which had a cemetery on it. But all of these new houses were part of that original land. So all kinds of things were happening around them. And it was kind of funny. She didn't mention the cemetery until about 3 weeks into checking.
It's kind of important information.
Yeah, well, your back door opens to almost a cemetery, so could be part of it. But, you know, that's interesting when you think about back in the day, you don't know what the property lines were, and maybe all of these houses were part of, you know, something that was owned by a certain family, shared a history, you know, whatnot. And there's really interesting explanations that might not be apparent at first. But Morgan has a great book and a course out called Teaching the Living. And, you know, is that about coping with spiritual activity and dealing with the supernatural around us, or just helping people understand what all of this means? Because, you know, we don't know what kind of conclusions to draw. Maybe there are no conclusions to draw.
Yeah, Teaching the Living started with my dear friend Stephanie Wirtz, who co-founded Entity Seeker Research and Teachings with me. And we began really early realizing that there is a very, very huge human component in paranormal activity, that it's not something that's asserted on us. It's something that we're in participation with. And things like addressing things like psychokinesis, addressing things like creating, you know, thought forms and projections and all sorts of stuff. And we realized that people just in and of themselves have so much to do with what's going on around them. Like, we are not sitting here being victimized by something around us, that our emotional state, our unhealed wounds, our our day-to-day moods and what we're projecting into the world really does create an attraction point as to what we're experiencing. We're creating our reality all the time. And so Teaching the Living was really about getting people out of the idea that this was something that was out there, and making them realize that we are, as exactly like what Mike said, we are spiritual beings, and we have this role in the world that we're living in and creating, and that lends into the world of the paranormal as well. Stephanie and I found really quickly that the people that were having negative experiences with the paranormal were typically people that had a lot of baggage or unhealed stuff that was going on, and it was being projected outwards. And, you know, we're not the only ones that have reached this conclusion. I mean, people like Scott Rogo, Dr. William Roll, you know, all these parapsychologists throughout the years that have really dug into this have come to that same realization and conclusion. So my book, Teaching the Living, which I brought actually a copy of it. There we go. So my book, Teaching the Living, was written as a bit of a guide for people so that they could start to navigate what this looks like in their world for them. I talk about some really interesting cases as well that I've worked on over the years. But it really is like a bit of a guidebook so people can start breaking this information down and to start actually working with the spiritual world around them rather than fighting against it.
Well, that's kind of interesting, because usually one of the first instincts, and it's not wrong, is to dig into history, try to find out what happened there, and maybe try to communicate. But some of the equation could be ourselves.
It always is. And I mean, it is with every relationship we have, whether it be with parents or business or, the people we see day to day, we always have a role in whatever we're doing. And so, my big thing with supernatural circumstances as well has been to get people to understand that they not only have a role, but that also puts them in a position of empowerment. This puts them in this wonderful spot of, wait a minute, I can have a say as to what's actually going on in my life. And it doesn't mean that I have to accept the fact that, great Aunt Betty is gone and I'll never see her again. This gives me the opportunity to reconnect with that spiritual part of the world and, these amazing beings and things like that. And I think it's so important for people to have that connection, especially in this day and age. And that, like you were mentioning, where things are stressful, it feels often like stuff is out of our control. And I mean, this really starts to bring the power and put it back in the hands of ourselves, because we are spiritual beings and we're powerful.
And that's so important when somebody is in a situation where they're living in a place and they feel powerless and they feel helpless and they feel victimized and they feel like I'm battling something I can't even see.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times you will hear about these stories getting worse and worse and worse as the people become more and more afraid, more and more exhausted. Time goes by, they don't have any answers, nothing's getting better, and it's a spiral downward.
Very much so. And when Stephanie and I first started, that was the one thing that we realized really quickly, was that a lot of these entities have very specific patterns. And we spent the first, at least 5 or 6 years of our studies working through what those behavior patterns were. We don't know what these things are. We can't answer that. We don't have the answers to those questions. But what we started to focus on was behavior, and what was it that was triggering some of these things that were going on? What was it that was seemed to be creating the problem and making it worse? The approaches that people were having, saying, "Oh, I can fix this for you," and then, of course, they would leave and everything would get worse 2 weeks later. All of these types of things that we wanted to know why. Why is that happening? And when we began to realize that it has to do with the people themselves and the dynamics that they get going within the house, it really started to shift and change. And so the clients, when we were still taking clients back in the day, that had a profound effect on how we dealt with things, and it turned situations around very quickly.
That's really interesting. I love that. I think that's really important for people to know and feel empowered and feel like I can do something here, and also maybe, I don't know, would you say make a boundary?
Yeah, it's making a boundary, but it's also focusing in on ourselves to understand why we're in the situation we're in. What I found often with some of these negative entities is that they are a direct reflection of something that we've got going on within us. I remember a case, this was a few years ago now, but I remember a case where I had a woman phone, and she and her husband and her young son, who was probably about 2-3 years old, was having a terrible time, to the point where they were sleeping in their van. She was getting attacked. The little boy was getting attacked. It was terrible. But the husband was not. The husband was actually making out okay. And when we started to ask her, like, can we talk a little bit about, what you've got going on emotionally? Like, why are you in this position where this is what you're pulling into your world? And she said, I don't know. My life is great. There's nothing wrong, so on and so forth. And then a little while later, she finally told us that she had just gotten out of a really abusive relationship. The husband she was with now was this really, really great guy, but she had just finished a relationship where a guy was beating her up and just being horrible. And interestingly enough, she'd kind of gotten out of that, gotten into this relationship, and done none of the healing work to repair the damage that she had incurred, obviously coming out of such a horrible situation. And what was interesting was that this entity was, whether it be something that was psychokinetic or whether it would be something that was an intelligence apart from her or whatever, was displaying the exact same behaviors that she had not healed, that this ex-boyfriend was coming at her with. And so it really was about her being able to step out and heal that wound. And as soon as she started to be able to heal that wound, then this activity started to die off and go away. But it really is about sort of coming back into ourselves and, being able to find your power, find that sense of strength, but also be vulnerable enough to look at yourself and go, wait a minute, like why is this here? Because nothing is by accident.
Do you think that the spirit world can sense your wounds and then just kind of push your buttons, and they're, using that emotional reaction to stay powerful and stay in control of you? And they, like, for example, I would say, do they know like one person's fear, one person's wound compared to another?
I found that they necessarily don't see it that way. What Stephanie and I discovered, and I talk about in Teaching the Living, is that they seem to see it more as a hierarchy, almost like dogs see their world. Many times you watch shows like Cesar Millan dealing with dog behavior and things like that. You see something very, very similar, is that the dog's not looking at you going, you had a bad relationship, so I'm going to push your buttons. But the dog is misbehaving anyway. Mm-hmm. And the dog is sensing the fact that it does not have a leader in the space. There's no leader. There's no pack leader. So therefore, you're underneath the dog, and it's going to correct your behavior. And now you've got a red zone dog. You've got a dog that's biting and attacking people and barking and flying off the rails for whatever reason. But it's not because the dog's necessarily looking at you going, that's it, I'm gonna get you. And I found that that's often the way it is with some of these negative entities as well, is that they're just seeing their situation like they're in a role. And if you're not healed, if you're not calm, assertive, if you're not those things, then it's going to show you where you're broken. And it will get worse the longer you leave it. So you end up with these varying degrees of cases where you hear about these horrible things, where people being bitten or attacked or pushed or shoved, or cabinets being, we did an episode recently, Mike and I, on Supernatural Circumstances, where there were cabinets being ripped off the walls, and holes being torn in the drywall and all sorts of things. And it all comes back to okay, well, how have you got your dynamics set up here? And so that's part of what I talk about in Teaching the Living, is how to set your dynamic up a little bit different in the family, so that you can find that sense of empowerment, and you can get back to being passionate. And as soon as you get it back into being passionate, one of the great things about that is that you end up tapping into the other end of the spiritual spectrum, which is the positive. And you see all these amazing things happening. And, the people that you've been told you've lost are now, they're visiting regularly, or, I heard grandma the other day in the other room. And so you get all this really, really positive stuff when you heal that stuff up. But it's as Carrie Lynn here says in the comments, we're in a constant co-creation, and for some people, accountability is a struggle. And she's absolutely right. The difficult part in these cases is the living. It's not the spirits.
That's so interesting the way you put that. And I watch a lot of Cesar Millan. I used to breed Boston Terriers.
Nice. They're wonderful dogs.
I love them. But it's interesting way to look at that, because something could be somewhere and be like, well, great, there's nobody in charge here. Chaos rules. Mm-hmm. And until something kind of brings in that calm leadership presence, it stays that way. But the effect on the human is to spiral the other way if they don't know that. They're just getting more afraid, more broken down, closer to giving up. And that's really interesting. I love that analogy that you use. That's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's just been something that I've seen so many times over the years. And what I've noticed as well, which is kind of interesting, and it's a bit of a juxtaposition to what you normally hear, is that a lot of these entities don't appreciate chaos. They don't like it. They're looking for that order. They're trying to find it. And often they're trying to establish the order in the house themselves, which is not ideal for the people in the house, because they're usually the ones that are, in the entity's view, misstepping, which then results in a bite or a scratch or a shove or something going on. But usually they're not a fan of chaos. I had a case, I'll just recount this really quickly, here in Edmonton. And it was somebody who became a good friend of mine. She bought this huge historical mansion, and she decided she was going to renovate this mansion. And as soon as she started to tear things apart and whatnot, she ran into the entity that seemed to call this place home. And its favorite mechanism of getting her to get out of the floor that it really liked to reside in was to make the entire space smell like cat pee. And it was so bad, you would go up there and it would hit you like a brick until it settled down, and then the smell would completely disappear. But she had once we got her settled out with this thing, and everything seemed to be doing okay, she had brought in a roommate, and that change upset this entity again, because it doesn't like the imbalance. And she was doing major renovations at the time on a historical theater here in Edmonton, and she had a great big fat book of blueprints for this theater that they were supposed to build. And she came down the one morning, and this thing had ripped this book of blueprints from here to Kingdom Come. Wow. And it had there were chew marks in it. She didn't have any pets. There was chew marks in it. This thing was in pieces. And she had to go to the foreman that day and explain that the entity ate her homework, and she couldn't. They had to get another one printed. But again, it was expressing its displeasure of the fact that there's this new person, and who is this person, and whatnot. So understandably, people are pretty afraid of some of this stuff, but there's a way to manage it, and it's possible.
I had some experiences, and as I got older, I found that saying things aloud and making boundaries or conditions helped a lot.
Sure.
And I would say, hey, I understand that you're here. I understand that you're, connected to this place or whatnot. And I would tell them that I'll pray for them, and that I wish the best for them, and that their relatives are waiting for them. But then I would be, don't touch me, don't scare me, don't touch my family. If you do, I'll have you run out. And I meant it, because I knew people that would come and run them out or do a good job trying anyway, make life difficult for a spirit that, people might want to move on to another realm. And that would help. And also, the more that I was curious, and the more that I was willing to try and do EVP and find out more, they took that as an invitation that they wanted me to, they thought I wanted to communicate. I wanted them to be more visible, more active, more interactive with me.
Yeah, well, I think, it kind of goes into that whole old adage, what you resist persists, right? And, the more attention we give to something, the more it magnifies. And it doesn't matter what it is in our life. It's the typical, I guess, stance of a lot of people is, if I pay a lot of attention to this, then the problem is going to get solved. But usually it's actually the other way around, is that, the more attention you give a problem, the more the problem increases. And you've really got to come at the problem with the energy of solution rather than the energy of problem. And I think, like when it comes down to a lot of people that run into these situations, they want to go and run out and get a camera and get an EVP recorder, or do whatever the ghost hunters on TV are doing. But if you want to solve the problem, starve it of your attention. And that's usually one of the key solutions to this stuff.
We had a guest recently that's a psychic, and she's wonderful, and her name's Susan Ahern. and she was working on a film project and brought something home with her. And she said she was exhausted, and there was a knock at the door, and she opened the door and saw something awful. And she just says, "Look, I don't have time for this crap. I'm too tired for this crap." Just slams the door and goes to bed. I thought that was so boss. So like, who does that? But that's what she
Right.
did.
She ghosted the ghost. Is what
Right.
she-
So there's a response you don't hear very often, but you do have the right to say that.
Yep.
For sure you do. You know, you don't have to just stand there and be terrified or whatever, you know, circumstance has befallen you, you know, that you're stuck. So our hour's going by pretty quick, and I want to talk about Mike's book a little bit too, because he has a brand new book coming out.
I do. It's called Strange, Spooky, and Supernatural. And I started in true crime. That's where my writing
That's really interesting.
journey began. But yeah, so my first book was called Murder, Madness, and Mayhem, and that sold really well. So the publisher that I'm with, HarperCollins, decided that I should write a second book. And I thought, well, I don't know if I'm going to write about crime this time, because I have a real fascination with the things that Morgan and I talk about. So I dug into my archives for these dozen or so or more than a dozen stories about people, places, and things from around the world that I find fascinating and have, you know, dug up. Like, I mean, I talk about Harry Houdini in the first episode just because he was so instrumental in spiritualism and the way he approached things. It really informs how I do things as well. So so he was an important figure to me. So let's write about him. Let's write about Harry Houdini. And luckily, last time I was in LA, my friends and I were out driving around, and it's like, oh, there's Harry Houdini's house. It's like, oh, that's really cool. So, you know, get to hang out a little bit around Harry Houdini's house and feel that energy, as it were. But yeah, I just thought, let's talk about some challenging things. Morgan and I, in our first episode of Supernatural Circumstances, we talked about a thing called the Philip experiment. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but a group of Canadian, we're both Canadian, Morgan and I, a group of Canadian parapsychologists in Toronto took it upon themselves to create an entity. They wanted to have like a seance. My cat's crying, so if you hear meow meow, it's my cat. But they wanted to create this entity. They wanted to see if they could, and they did. They created this guy from the 17th century named Philip, who was a nobleman and all this kind of crazy stuff. And there's documentary footage on YouTube of a table literally moving around in a way that doesn't make any sense, and people all have their hands on top of the table. How is this thing how is this happening? It was really well documented. And so the fact that we did that as our first episode, and we talk about consciousness as a thing, as sort of the like, it is not emergent, it's fundamental. Consciousness is there. Everything is consciousness. And what is it that we're doing to tap into that? So a bunch of different stories throughout this book that I did will cover that topic. Also, I talk about near-death experiences. We've been lucky enough to talk to Eben Alexander. What is it, 3 times now, Morgan?
Yeah, it's been amazing.
And so Dr. Alexander was a neuro scientist who was very materialistic and based in the material world until he had an extended near-death experience over a long period of time. Like, I think it was like 6 to 9 days. I can't remember exactly. But he was essentially brain dead, but he was off in different realms and all this kind of stuff. And he's written fantastic books on it. If you want to look him up, Eben Alexander, he's so interesting, and you can watch him talk to us.
His name Evan, or are you saying
Eben, Eben,
Eben?
Alexander? Yeah, Dr. Eben Alexander.
Eben Alexander, nice.
Yeah. So he's just his approach and how, where he went. He came back from this thing and he was like, holy crap, I was wrong. The whole all this stuff that I've been thinking my whole life about, this is the way it is. Mm-hmm. Guess what? It ain't like that at all. And it took this experience of him almost dying to crack his mind open enough to make him willing to see those kind of things. So, and that's how I finished the book, with his story.
It's so interesting too, because I think it's very, very possible that the real truth and everything that's out there, and I don't even think that our little brains could comprehend all that it really is, even though we keep trying, and we should keep trying. But I mean, I think that the answer and the answers and everything that's out there is actually quite enormous.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's like this experience. I mean, we try to simplify it, with our language, our human language. We're so cute. Mm-hmm. We try to simplify everything and whatever. But I think, that's one of the things that we wanted to do with Supernatural Circumstances, and still are trying to do, which is exactly what you said, Mike, which is give people sort of an in where they can start to crack this open a little bit. And everybody's journey is going to be different. But if you can get the door open a crack, it's amazing what you can find.
Mm-hmm.
So we just have a few minutes left. So if you want to let everybody know where they can find you and your podcast and Morgan's course, and she's had a new project called My Haunted Hometown, and that's being shown in Canada, I believe she said. Possible that it will be shown in the US at some point.
Yeah, so you can tune into Supernatural Circumstances literally on any platform, Apple, Spotify, you name it. You can just Google it, find it, and subscribe. Come with us on what is become an incredible journey. And we take the television bull out of the paranormal, and that's really our aim. We have some of the best minds in the world, like Mike was saying, Dr. Eben Alexander, among many others, who just take the Hollywoodization out of what this really is, but we keep the fun. And that's the really important part about it. So, we'd love for everybody to please subscribe to the show. It's just, we have such a blast. We're looking forward to many more seasons. So it's really cool. You can find me by going to entityseeker.ca. And entityseeker.ca, it's a one-stop shop. You can actually subscribe to the podcast from there as well. My books, as well as Mike's book, is on there also if you want to pre-order that. So, and Mike, I'll let you go ahead and talk about yours.
Yeah, well, you can find our show at supernaturalcircumstances.com. That's our main show. And then my true crime podcast, you can find that at darkpoutine.com. And my book, you can buy pretty much anywhere. If you're in Canada, Indigo, Amazon, or Amazon all over the world.
I want to thank you both so much for being on. I'm so sorry that Father Shawn wasn't here, and I know that he's going to be sorry that he missed having you, and maybe we can schedule a follow-up and bring you back. But I think we really did have an interesting conversation. These are topics that I think we could probably go on and talk 3, 4, 5, 10 hours about, and just one thing leads to another and another and another. But I really enjoyed the show, and thank you for being so gracious to come. And I hope to see you again soon and book you back on again soon. And Mike, good luck with your book.
Thank you very much.
I hope it goes real well.
Yeah.
Thank you too, Annette. Yeah, thank you. And to you and to Father Shawn, and send us his or send him our best wishes for his speedy recovery.
For sure I will. Thank you so much.